Hey folks, this is Kalani. Patch 9.2.5 goes live this very next reset, but Blizzard is squeezing in some last minute changes for the patch. We have some huge buffs and nerfs coming in for both classes and for the Sepulchre of the First One's raid. There are some real big changes here, so let's break it all down and see what the devs are changing last minute. Before we jump in, be sure to hit up that like button and subscribe so you never miss another video. Let's kick things off with those class buffs. These came in as hotfixes, so they're being squeezed in right before the patch goes live. For starters, all classes will now generate more threat when in tank specializations. I guess tanks were having some troubles keeping threat in some instances, which doesn't really surprise me that much when you look at the crazy damage some DPS can put out right now. We've got set bonuses on top of legendaries, on top of huge item levels, and even some strong trinkets. You know, it all combines with some massive burst damage in certain classes, and not everyone has access to misdirect, so a small increase in threat generations should keep things balanced going forward. At least that's the dev team's hope. For the actual class buffs, Hunters are up first. Beast Mastery Hunters will see a 4% damage increase for all of their abilities and their pet damage as well. In addition to that, Beast Cleave now causes your pet to strike other targets for 100% of the pet's damage, up from 90%. So you get a small boost to all of your damage and also a small boost to your reliable AoE damage in Beast Cleave. Hopefully that will keep them a bit more competitive alongside the other two strong Hunter specs. For the mages, Arcane is going to see quite a few buffs. Arcane Missiles damage has been increased by 8%, Arcane Blast damage has been increased by 10%, and Clear Casting can no longer be dispelled. So some nice buffs to single target damage, and the Clear Casting protection will be nice for PvP scenarios. There is a slight nerf here for Frost Mages as well, but it's only for PvP. The Gift of the Lich Conduit duration was reduced by 33% in PvP. I guess Frost Mages were a little too strong with that duration being so long, but again, it's just for PvP. Monks will also see some buffs. There is a small one for Mistweavers. The cooldown on Zen Focus Tea was reduced to 30 seconds, down from 45 seconds. According to the dev notes, this was to help Mistweavers respond better to burst damage. Then there are also a lot of buffs for Windwalker. Rising Sun Kick damage was increased by 20%, Fists of Fury damage to primary target was increased by 20%, Blackout Kick damage increased by 20%, Tiger Palm damage increased by 20%, and Fist of the White Tiger damage increased by 20%. Those are some huge buffs for single target especially. We don't see 20% buffs very often, so Windwalkers will hopefully feel more impactful with these buffs in play. Now note that none of these changes will apply in PvP content, so if you're worried about Windwalkers suddenly decimating you in battlegrounds after these buffs, you can rest assured, it's PvE buffs only. For the priests, Discipline is getting some small changes. Blaze of Light increases the damage to Smite and Penance by 30%, up from 15%, and then there are some PvP changes as well. Power Word Shield Absorb amount increased by 10% in PvP, and a bug was fixed that was reducing the value of Power Word Shield critical strikes. Rogues actually have quite a few changes as well. To start with, the Recuperator Conduit's healing was reduced by 50% in PvP. In addition to that, Outlaw has a whole bunch of buffs. Between the Eyes damage increased by 20%, Pistol Shot damage increased by 20%, Sinister Strike damage increased by 20%, and Blade Flurry damage increased to 60% of single target damage, up from 50%. None of these changes will apply to PvP, so it's just PvE buffs once again. The Enduring Brawler PvP talent has been changed too, stacking up to 15 times, down from 20. So very similar to the monks from above, lots of big buffs which will hopefully help them keep up with the competition. Moving on, the Shamans will see a 20% increased effectiveness to Healing Stream Totem in PvP combat. For Elementals specifically, Raging Vesper Vortex damage was reduced by 33% in PvP, and Earth Shock damage is no longer reduced by 10% in PvP. For Enhancement, Chain Harvest damage and healing was reduced by 15% in PvP, and then for Restoration, Earthen Wall Totem's Absorb is no longer reduced by 30% while in PvP. Warlocks are also on this list, although with nowhere near as many changes as some other classes. For Destro, Ritual of Ruin now lasts for 30 seconds, and the 4-piece bonus will no longer stun enemies in PvP. For Demonology, Legion Strike now reduces effectiveness of healing on targets by 25%, up from 10% in PvP. And then last but not least, we come to the warriors. For arms, mortal strike damage was increased by 10%, overpower damage was increased by 10%, and execute and condemn damage was increased by 15%. None of these changes apply to PvP. And then for fury, the depths of insanity conduit's effectiveness was reduced by 50% in PvP, and the balanced trance PvP talent now generates 3 rage, down from 5 every 3 seconds for 18 seconds after using Raging Blow twice in a row on a target. So a slight nerf there as well. And that's it for the class buffs. So many classes will see some big changes, and I'm surprised that many of these buffs weren't spread out over the span of the 925 PTR cycle, but at least they made it in before the patch goes live. There are some massive nerfs coming for the Sepulchre of the First One's raid as well. At this point, we usually only see mythic nerfs, but a lot of these nerfs are actually for every difficulty, so let's see what lies in store. First up, Artificer Zymox has seen a small nerf. The Decipher Relic cast time was increased up to 30 seconds from 25 seconds on Mythic difficulty, giving you 5 extra seconds to work with. Up next, Prototype Pantheon has seen a small nerf as well. The Imprinted Safeguards will reduce damage and healing taken by 35%, down from 50%, making it less effective overall, so it'll be easier to deal with those shields if you miss a break. Then we also have some nerfs for Lehuvim as well. His health has been reduced by 10% on all difficulties, making the fight quite a bit faster overall, and the Protoform Schematics health was also reduced by 10% on all difficulties, making it easier and faster to kill the adds across the entire raid. 10% to both of those health pools is a very significant nerf, and it will make the fight much easier overall. Halandrus also has a couple of nerfs, which is surprising considering how badly this fight has been nerfed already. Ephemeral Eruption initial damage reduced significantly on Mythic difficulty, potentially making that less of an issue overall. And then the Light Shatter Beam debuff has been nerfed as well. It used to increase damage from future Light Shatter Beams by 500%, and that's been reduced to 300% on Heroic difficulty. That should make it easier to survive a second hit if your tanks miss a taunt, but it's still going to be quite painful. Moving on, Anduin has been nerfed very heavily. Anduin's health was reduced by 5% on all difficulties, the Monstrous Soul's health has been reduced by 5% on all difficulties, and Anduin's Despair health was also reduced by 10% on all difficulties. In addition to those health nerfs, Anduin's Hope movement speed was reduced on Heroic and Mythic difficulty, Remorseless Winter's damage was reduced by 10% on all difficulties, Hopebreaker damage over time was reduced by 15% on all difficulties, and then the Fiendish Soul's Necrotic Claw's cooldown was increased by 50% on all difficulties. That is a long list of heavy nerfs for this fight, and most of them aren't limited to just Mythic, so whether you're still working through normal, Heroic or Mythic, this fight is going to be significantly easier with these nerfs in 925. Lords of Dread is also getting quite a few nerfs. To start with, Mal'Ganis and Quintessa's health were reduced by 5% on all difficulties, so the fight will be a little shorter overall. Swarm of Decay and Swarm of Darkness damage was reduced by 7.5% on all difficulties, so those key abilities will deal less damage as well. Ravenous Hunger now heals the Inchoate Shadow for 13% on Mythic difficulty, up from 10%. Cloud of Carrion will no longer disorient players when jumping on Heroic and Mythic difficulty, which will make juggling those stacks way less annoying, and then Infiltration of Dread duration was increased by 10 seconds on Heroic and Mythic, giving you more time to find those pesky imposters. Rygolon also made the nerf list, though there's only one to talk about. Collapsing Quasar's field duration was increased by 50% on Mythic difficulty, and while that might seem like a minor ability for the fight, that's actually a very important nerf because it gives you more time to clear your debuffs, which can very often be the cause of early wipes on Rygolon. And then the list wouldn't be complete without the Jailer himself on the chopping block. There are a lot of nerfs here as well. Rune of Compulsion's Absorb reduced by 33% on normal and heroic difficulty, and 10% on Mythic difficulty. Misery no longer knocks back on Raid Finder, normal or heroic difficulty. Decimator no longer knocks back on Raid Finder and normal difficulty. Diverted Life Shield no longer heals on Mythic difficulty. World Crusher produces 2 less Bloods of Azeroth on Mythic difficulty. World Shatterer produces 1 less Blood of Azeroth on Mythic difficulty. And Phase 4 is now triggered at 15% health on Mythic difficulty. So not only did they nerf quite a few abilities here to make the fight easier, especially on Mythic, but they also changed several key aspects of the fight. These are pretty big nerfs overall for the Jailer encounter, and it should make it much easier for players to get there ahead of the curve or cutting edge achievements before Season 4 rolls around. Now remember, patch 925 goes live this very next reset, so we practically don't have to wait for any of these changes to make it into the game. With a round of class buffs alongside some raid nerfs, the Sepulchre of the first ones is going to feel quite a bit easier next week. With a Season 4 planned and coming sometime soon, it also doesn't surprise me that we're seeing even more nerfs to the Sepulchre raid. The raid as a whole has proven to be quite a tough nut to crack, and I think we've seen more nerfs to this raid than any other raid we've had recently in the game. Part of that is probably due to the raid being quite difficult to begin with, but another part is most likely to do with the fact that this end of expansion raid is not going to last as long as they usually do. We have a new season coming up, so they want players to be able to get there ahead of the curve and cutting edge achievements before Season 4, whereas that's usually before the next expansion launches. The timeline is shorter, so the nerfs will come faster. That kind of makes sense, but what I am most interested in here is that all three of the Shadowlands raids went through significant nerfs towards the end of their life cycle. Some fights were changed considerably, with mechanics being removed or reworked. So which version of the fight will we see in the fated raids for Season 4? The post-nerf fights with all the changes and quality of life improvements in place, or the initial version that the first folks had to struggle through before nerfs inevitably made their way into the mix? I'll be very interested to see how they decide to play this, because we've never seen anything like the fated raid system before. We're also going to have the raid affixes in play, so it's going to be a roller coaster ride no matter what happens. But that's all of the class buffs and raid nerfs coming in 925, and that's it for this video. Are there any classes you think need a big buff that were missed in this patch? Are there any other raid bosses that you think need some big nerfs? Leave all your thoughts in the comment section below. A big thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon and to everyone who's subscribed on Twitch. You can see their names floating by on screen. If you want to see more videos like this, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss another video. Thanks for watching, folks. Good luck and have fun, and as always, I'll see you next time.